This week on Transformation in 900 Seconds, things are going to be a little different. We are going to deviate from our regular program and circle back to our first guest from this series, Tony Hansman. And rather than focus on transformation specifically, as we have been, we are going to dive a little deeper into a model that Tony first introduced me to, the Right Kind Works model. We'll focus on a scenario totally made up for the purpose of this episode, I promise. And the goal is to work through how Right Kind works and the model can be applied. This will hopefully be the beginning of a number of recordings on this, and for listeners who would like to understand more, please reach out to myself or Tony. This is something we're both very passionate about, and we would love to speak to more companies, more subject matter experts out there, and share our insights and share how we feel about this model and how it can be applied. But hopefully this episode, this recording, will help give you some insight to how we see it being applied within the industry and the benefits that it can bring. Great to chat to you again, Tony. It's always a pleasure. I know this is kind of building on from our original conversation that we had a few weeks ago as part of the Transformation in 900 Seconds podcast. This is a little bit more of a collaboration effort, I suppose. So today we're going to talk a little bit through the RKW, the Right Kind Works model. I'll let you introduce the model as well.
Sure.
And the goal today is to, essentially dive into a scenario, a real life scenario, or an in real life scenario, as I know you would like to call it.
Yep.
And try and leverage the model to see how we would address it from a problem solving point of view. So before we jump into it, do you want to give an overview of the model and how you founded it, I suppose?
Sure. It's pretty brief. Basically, at Pivotal, there are a set of values, and they really live by them, right? And so that is do what's right, and right here, just we can break down that definition. Do what's kind, and do what works. And so there's another video, 30 minutes, that really breaks down what that means. But the shortest version to think of it is, if you're sitting in a room problem solving with people, you want to make sure that your solutions all pass. Is this right? Does it work? Is it kind? And so often we have a hard time, we put something on the table, hey, we're going to do this, but we don't really think, well, the support people are going to experience a 35% jump in call volume if we do that. And no one thinks about that. So we want to make sure we're thinking about everyone. And so that's how you use Right Kind in Works. Hey, is adding a 35% call volume to the support team without asking them or talking to them about that, does that make sense? Is that kind? Is it right? Does it work? That's a really basic way you'd think about it. But of course, problems are never that clear cut. So I'm excited to jump into actual scenarios and see what we can see with it.
Yeah, no, cool. And I appreciate that. So let's take the scenario, right? This is something I just drew together for this call on purpose, and this will be the first of probably a couple of scenarios that we try and work through. But let's say the company, it's a small tech company. They implemented CI/CD practices since day one, so something they've always had from the inception. So they're a more modern tech stack. They've grown quickly, and their original plan was to end up, really getting to a mature CI/CD pipeline over a period of time. Now, and that plan has somewhat got skewed up as they dealt with some of the growing pains from ultimately growing quickly. There was a big push as part of that to reach daily deployments. But doing so has ended up putting a large amount of pressure on teams. It's forcing almost 12-hour days from every development team within the organization. Large amounts of manual QA is being pushed because it's the only way that they can get through, but that's ultimately causing the bottleneck, resulting in long days, right? Just because they have to do the daily deployment. Their CI/CD process is not mature enough to support that kind of delivery cycle. So obviously you can tell it would take a toll on the quality of the product being delivered, but it's also taking a toll on the morale of the team. So the leadership team sit down and they say, look, right, we need to look at this. We need to map out a path forward. But there's even within that, there's a fraction and there's a split. Some of the team want to scale back. They say the right thing to do is move at a slower pace, scaling up to the North Star of daily deployments eventually, but getting there in a way that's meaningful and effective, but not rushing to it. While you have the other side of that room that's saying, no, this is what the industry is doing. This is what all of our competitors are doing. It doesn't matter if we technically aren't capable of it, we have to figure out a way to do it today, and we will continue, even if that means putting in long hours, even if that means introducing technical debt, because that's the only way we're going to keep our customers, because they want to see us as being that trendsetter. It's the only way we're going to attract staff, is if we're saying we're modern, we deploy daily. That's what candidates want to hear. And so this is the problem, right? You've got this process that no longer fits. You're pushing it, and you've got to split in the leadership team about how they feel like they should address it. And obviously, the success or what is the goal, they want to get to a point where daily deployments is something that they can do, but it's done in the right way, not just because they have to.
Yeah.
So if you take that as that's the scenario, the requirements, let's say, of this business, because I think that's important for any problem and so for context setting for you as, let's say, the consultant that is in trying to help them resolve this issue.
Yeah.
They have a couple of SLAs, right? They've got up 99.99% uptime and availability is something that they have an SLA around, right? They must hit that. They have SLAs around their SEV 1 and SEV 2 defects as well. So there's certain elements there that they must be able to hit. One of those is SEV 3 is a 15-day turnaround. And these are arbitrary numbers, right? So real life scenarios will always be a little bit more particular.
Yep.
SEV 2 is a 5-day turnaround, and SEV 1 is a 1-day turnaround. Again, the importance of that is we're talking about daily deployments. How necessary is that within the business? That's where the SLAs will come into play within the problem solving.
Yep.
And they have no contractual obligations to release software updates on a daily basis. There is no written commitment with any legal ramification for why they must do this. This is purely a want, a desire, and something that is believed to be the right industry thing to do.
Yeah. Yep.
And then let's before we kind of jump into the game, let's talk about some of the areas we should be conscious of, right? And so we talked about this a little bit in our kind of precursor to this, which was talking about the model itself and how the game would be structured. But we want to remember as we try to solve this that people should be honest, right? They should use their honest player. There's no win-win, right? Compromise is there, but you can't. We're going to have to be conscious. There's no ability to have a win for both sides of the coin. We need to figure out the right way to solve the problem. Governance is an outcome that must be delivered, right? So there must be a go forward governance around this. There's a reciprocal no. So it's a team, members of the leadership team have the ability to say no and not feel like they're doing it just out of sheer, will or anything like that. They are saying no because they truly don't believe in that is the right way to go. And we need to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where there is one person or one portion of that leadership team ultimately driving the decision. It needs to be a collaborative decision at the end. So taking all that into mind, how would you begin to apply the model?
Well, just right away, we're going to move toward the executive, right? The people who set the goals are the ones who will have to re-examine those goals and figure out if they make sense. So right away, I would want to hear, well, hey, what do we really think is going to happen if we keep doing this, these long days and all of that? Someone, I would like to see someone in leadership just talk about what scenarios they see there. There's a few other things that we would sort of need to be interesting, which is, hey, the people in each of the factions, how have they succeeded in their careers? So if you have a super aggressive type A person who's like, the way you win is you just keep battling until everyone gives up. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to deliver 12-hour days, and we're going to deliver software until all of our competitors give up, or something like that. You want to ask how other people have succeeded too. Like, well, what is their 10 years in industry, the last 10 years in industry, tell them about what they should do? And then finally, we're going to need to know if anyone has a horizon longer than the next few months. Is there on leadership? Is there a horizon for 6 months, 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year? Is anyone thinking that far ahead? And those things right away will tell us what tools we have to work with. Because if we can't change executive mind, we're not going to change anyone's mind. Especially when you have factions, one faction saying, forward, nose to the grindstone. Another faction is like, well, maybe we should slow down. So any commentary on what we could learn about that?
Yeah. So let's go back to the first, right? What happens if the long days continue? So part of the reason that the leadership team have sat down to have this discussion is ultimately that they begin to see within the teams the dissatisfaction with those hours. Right? They're getting team members that are becoming frustrated. There is the blame game has started, and that's where the QA bottleneck has arisen.
Yep.
And we have teams that are complaining, "Hey, I don't want to stay back till 8 p.m. just because QA can't deliver on time." Right? So it's starting to cause fractions within the teams themselves, and the finger pointing has started. Right?
Yep.
The leadership team themselves and the makeup of that team is split. You have the founders of the business, which ultimately come from a pure software background, and their only interest is delivering quality software. And they're on the side of, let's slow this down, right? These are developers, these are our team. They care about the human, and they have empathy towards their teams, right? They understand, and they're trying to. That's where they're pushing on the. Let's revisit this. The other side of the leadership team is made up of two groups. You have the sales lead, and no offense to any salespeople out there, because there's some good guys too, but the sales team are driving hard because they're saying, no, right? If we're going to go to the market, we have to differentiate ourselves, and we don't want to be the company that can't go out and say to our potential customers, oh, well, we deploy daily, right? It's just a must-have in their mind in terms of how they go and the message they portray. And then you have also the investments team, right? And these are members of the leadership team that have come in through the external investor process, and they are there to essentially drive growth within the business any means they know how. Part of their investment was contingent on certain success criteria, and part of that was getting to a point where daily deployments existed, because daily deployments mean there's other elements of savings that they can take out of the business, right? They're looking for efficiencies. So they're looking to get that goal however they can. So you've got kind of those three elements. So it's kind of a 2-to-1 right now in terms of let's just keep pushing forward.
Yep.
But the 3-year horizon, let's say, the tablets of stone that have come down from the executive and leadership team is, collaboration. We want our teams to work together. We want to be successful together. Trust. We want to make sure that we trust each other as team members, that you can sit to the person next to you and trust the work that they're doing, and vice versa. And you can trust in the fact that they'll support you throughout it, right? So there's two tablets of stone they have. Also, leaner, faster to value, right? They want to be able to deliver faster, and that's probably where this is kind of stemming from. And the fourth, I suppose, tablet of stone is being the manager of the business. So they want every team member to feel like they're empowered to change how the business operates, drive the business forward, take ownership, come up with ideas, and essentially, take on the managing director role as an employee. So think about the business and essentially be invested in the success of the business by feeling like you can help make those decisions.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay, that makes sense. Give me a second. Okay. Well, let's first of all take this. The reason that we're having so we always have to ask, what are the reasons for the 12-hour days? And sales wants to drive hard, and investors want to drive growth. But having 12-hour days is just flatly against what's on the 3-year horizon. Does that make sense? You're like,
right, exactly.
Yeah, and you couldn't really choose that goal. So now we're just going to have to find out from the executives, well, who's lying here? Like, right. Who signed up for this 3-year goal of collaboration, trust team members, leaner, faster to value? Every team member is employed. Every employee could drive the business forward, and everyone could do a managing director role. Like, those sound great, and literally, if you could deliver those that would be fascinating and amazing. But what are we trying to balance that against? And so if it's important for us to have a kind of press point of view that we can deliver every day, Well, okay, would it be just as valuable to say that we could deliver every day because we have master always ready to deliver, but we don't necessarily deliver? Like that's one of the traps that people fall into is they hear CI/CD and they think we should deliver every day. But probably the answer is we should deliver when it economically makes sense. And so right away you can start healing the hard driving salespeople. There's what happens. What we're in here is what's called a split. It's just a comment. Everyone knows what a split is. If you go to one of your parents and you say, "Can I have candy?" and they say no, and then you go to the other parent and ask the same question, you are involving your parents in a split. Because if you went to both of them at the same time and one of them said no, the other would just defer probably, right?
Right.
The problem with the split we have here is there's some people that are saying we have to deliver. And whenever I hear that, I think of the term, there's this term that we say in US politics, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. Some Supreme Court justice said that. And so deliverables like delivering every day is not a suicide pact. I mean, you got to be able to know if you say, hey, if we ship every day, we make $20,000 more a day. Well, now we've got something to go on. But if you say we ship every day and it's worth something in recruiting, like, well, maybe if our recruiting thing were we have absolute commitments to shipping as fast as we can, and we bound that economically and humanely to find out what's a good shipping for both our product and our people. So you can cover some of your concerns in recruiting right there. Having actual empathy for teams, giving people a lot of runway to be, as our 3-year goals would say, giving a lot of people a lot of runway to figure out how this business is actually going to work. That's very attractive, especially to a small company. It's harder to deliver at a medium and large company. But if you're a small company, you can deliver that, then, make a hypothesis. Hey, if we let staff members brainstorm on how we could deliver better service, and they feel empowered by that. And it's not a, hey, thanks for your idea, no one's ever going to use it. Because if you're going to do thanks for the idea, no one's ever going to use it. Well, that doesn't actually get the kind of team cohesiveness you want. It just means that one person makes a decision and everyone else doesn't.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think if you look at this particular scenario, and I'm somewhat maybe biased towards the scenario because I've created it in my mind at this point, but one of the big things that would stand out to me if I'm sitting in the room with that leadership team, trying to help them, coaching them through this, problem-solving mission or, mediating, whatever you want to call it, is you just mentioned it. What is the value in you deploying daily, right? There's no SLA that defines that you must do that, right? You've never committed to a daily deployment to a customer. You have no contractual obligation to it. Are you doing it just because you think it's the right thing to do? And then if you think it's the right thing to do, why do you think that? And I would almost start there with a team and say, okay, let's value stream this. Like, why do you feel it's the right thing to do? And to the opposite team, why do you feel like it's not the right thing to do?
Yeah. Your point, you're absolutely right. And the real thing I realized to summarize is, hey, management has to be saying the same thing. And so what I would fundamentally say is, if you can't get your management and senior leadership aligned on some basic things, then you're always going to have a morass. You're always going to have someone who's second guessing or someone who's lost. And that is corrosive in an environment because staff members line up behind executives and managers who have helped them. So if the software founders who are interested in humane and sustainable work practices are, privately telling their teams like, well, I want sustainable and humane work practices, but I can't get them through these other people. Well, what's that do for staff members?
Right.
It's very discouraging. And it's like, well, these are the obvious right things to do. How come we can't get any airtime to actually get that heard. And so, if the investor group and the sales group is literally, because sometimes the investor groups and the sales groups are very smart and they're much better at people. They have skill sets that lend themselves to leading people. And so if they can, I don't know, sell something that is not really sustainable but can make it sound sustainable and humane, and then the whole business makes decisions based on that, well, I think you've got a broken process from the beginning.
Yeah. And I think when I look at it, you say, okay, well, you obviously know, right? When you sit down in that room and you say, okay, is this the right thing to do? When you lay all the cards on the table, everyone's going to probably ultimately at the end agree, okay, yeah, this is probably not right. It's not fair to do it this way, right?
Right.
We're pushing a square peg into a round hole ultimately. Yeah. But
let me just break that because it's super important. The right thing here is can we do it without heroics with people we can hire decade over decade?
Right. And the answer, yeah, and you can't, right? You have to essentially you're creating a hero culture on a daily basis because it's either that QA team member that gets their manual testing done a little bit quicker,
yeah,
or you're creating just the attitude of every team celebrates because, hey, great job, we released and we did it, we did another 12-hour day. I appreciate the commitment. There's only so many of those, hooray emails that can be sent out before people lose faith and say, oh, you know what, this isn't worth it. This is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
But, so as a team and as a leadership team, okay, we've agreed on the sheer that it's not right, it's not fair to do it this way, and then I would almost sit down and say, okay, well, go back to what you're trying to achieve, right? You said you were doing it because you thought it was right, and you felt it was right because you wanted to be trending with the industry, you wanted to attract talent, you wanted to attract customers. So if you take all of those value criteria and they're success criteria that the leadership team have just divulged to you, and you put them over to one side on a board, and you know that it's not right to push it like that. But if they're your value criteria, how else can you effectively achieve those without doing daily deployments, without doing something that causes the need for a hero, or without doing it because it needs 12-hour days? There's other ways you can accomplish and meet those success criteria without those negative impacts coming around to it. And I would ultimately start to then evaluate those options with the leadership team, because if you're looking for the solution to this problem, right, the ultimate solution is going to be, we need to have a longer horizon in terms of how we get to daily deployments.
Yeah,
that's obvious, but how do we achieve? So that's obviously going to be the value to one side of the group, and then the other side are saying, well, we still need to be attractive. So how do we achieve that in a right way? And I think that's where I would start leaning the conversation next. Is we've all agreed on one side. Now let's look at how we can achieve those goals that you still have in a more meaningful way that can also then help us achieve the ultimate goal.
Yeah, well, the whole thing is, when I see people starting with a process that's going to burn their people out, I often have to drop back. Like, well, would it be correct to build a factory machine that can work faster than the people you can hire? So any money that you spent on factory machine that work faster than people can actually work is a waste of money, right? That's over-engineered. Now, if you can take the people out and those machines can work at super high velocity, then great, definitely do that. But the software business still has a lot of people in it. And so if we don't, it is always, we'll call it a fault or a foul. It's always a foul not to look at what your people throughput needs to be daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. Because if you're designing systems that require 12-hour days or extremely painful release cycles or any of that sort of thing, you're just designing the wrong system. And 10 years ago, maybe there was just so much money available if you could automate something that it didn't matter. But now with the ultra high productivity frameworks and platforms and pipelines, all of that intuitional work from 10 years ago about how to get somewhere, make heroes. That was the intuitional work from 10 years ago. Find and hire heroes, allow them to do great work, allow those people around them who like working like them to assist them, and allow everyone else to just kind of stew in the background because they can get no credit, and they get assigned the things that no one would think are heroic. I don't know, debug the database problem, right? That's what that person gets, and write this new feature for customers is what the hero gets.
Right. So if you're standing in that room as the consultant, right, and we've been kind of, let's say we've spent a day, and you can see the room is starting to lean and say, okay, we all agree that, yeah, Tony, this wasn't the right choice, right? We know that pushing daily deployments is not the right way for us to go, at least not tomorrow or today.
Oh.
But you've made that message clear to us. Except for we still have this problem where we still have to be relevant. We still have to be attractive. How do you leveraging your model? How would you say that we start to evaluate the options that'll still allow us to be interesting to candidates and look to customers like we're leaping forward in terms of technology? And how would you help us? Or where would you point us to start mapping out that CI/CD journey with our ultimate goal of being at a point where we can do daily deployments and in a way that is right, kind, and works, right?
So the first thing, let's just pretend we can heal the split on the executive team. Because you literally can't do anything with that because
right.
So we're talking specifically about recruiting, how to be attractive to people who have many options besides your job. Well, the most valuable things to people here in 2019, money is obviously you have to pay industry wages and things like that, but the industry wages are enough to keep anyone in ramen and beautiful apartments. So keep up with the industry as wages. It's hard to compete on wages. I wouldn't. I would compete on the exact things we're talking about, meaning, like, hey, we're working on something meaningful, or maybe we're working on something boring, but it is meaningful. Like, oh, we're optimizing all light bulbs, all street lamps in a city to cut down. So one night of a month, there's very low light radiation. And we're just figuring out what night that should be and how to turn it off for the astronomers. Let's just say that's the value proposition. So great. Now we have something to work toward. And you can say in recruiting, hey, we're trying to help astronomy here. And in helping astronomy, here's how we work together. Because going back to how do we work humanely and the right way with people, I really do think mobbing or pairing, that is putting people in a group to load the same context and work on the same problem, deliver a result, and then do the iterations on the returned result. I think that's the most humane, in terms of right. I think that's a very humane process. It's also how you take heroes and actually spread their knowledge. And so you can see right away in the situation that you proposed that as soon as you get a couple of good people from QA sitting down mobbing or pairing with a couple of good people from development, they're right away going to find ways to, at the beginning of a process, lower the pain threshold. And so if you wanted to attack the problem that you've got, you would just put those two teams together and ask them to. So the scenario here is very big. How many products are we talking about? How many products are shipped daily, and what's our goal?
So there's 4 main product lines for argument's sake.
That's totally fine. That's all I needed to know. I don't need to go through the whole thing. You just choose the product line where there are friendly teams. Like, which product line does QA like best? And then you put QA with those folks. So they can find out at the source, well, what do the developers do that make this an easy to QA product? And what could we do to make it it doesn't require humans to QA. It might require humans to write tests and come up with testing scenarios and all that sort of thing, but QA is not actually a thing that happens. So to go all the way back to the top, a QA department is a red flag. It means that you have split quality into some other group who you can't quite be sure has the same North Star and goals and timing as your development group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so right kind in works where you said it. From the honest player position, you would have to ask everyone in senior leadership, hey, do you think anyone below you can get any effective work done if you're fractionated here? And at that point, I would go to the investor groups. Like, if you want growth out of this, you have to describe what growth model you're using. Because if they're using a pump and dump growth model, then guess what? You're working 12-hour days. That's what they're going to vote for. However, if they're like, well, we're looking to build a multiples scaling business, a highly scalable 10x, 100x business, then that's a long game. Just trying to build one of those is a long game. And so you might as well design the engineering, product, and all of that to handle a long design like that.
Right. So if I like trying to, I guess, summarize, right? So you make the assumption, right? We've outlined the scenario, right? We've got a fraction leadership team. We're deploying daily. It's causing multiple problems across multiple areas of the business, quality, morale, everything.
Yep.
So we start off by fixing the fraction, right? We get the leadership team to all agree, okay, yeah, this is not the right way to do things. We're going to move away from pushing or forcing deployments on a daily basis just because we want to do it, because we thought it was the way that we needed to move.
Well,
we can all agree that that's not the case.
Let me be clear. I don't know what decision they would come up with. All I would say is the leadership body needs to speak with one particular voice.
Yeah. So let's say that they do all agree that, yeah, okay, right, we're hands up, we don't want to do this, but the side that we're pushing it do say we still have a problem to solve, right? We still need to be relevant to all those things. If I was summarizing everything that you just made in your point around the right kind works model, it's, there's value in showcasing the product, right? What's the value in what you're building and you're pushing out? Make that the message that you share with people. Correct. Because that's important.
Feed. Yeah. In recruiting, what a candidate wants to hear is, I could go work on things that are meaningful to me with people I want to work with, for management that understands that people are not milling machines.
Right.
If you can get to that in your organization, and when you hire, you're like, here's how we do things here. The last, Sunday morning at 2 a.m. push we did was in 2015. We moved to a model that allows us to push daily. Because we're a SaaS, we actually use high feature flags so that product managers really control when customers are exposed, blah, blah, blah. You can see how that conversation would go. And that's paradise for developers.
Right.
And QA and everyone.
Yeah. So you're sitting, as the leadership team, you're now saying, well, we can showcase our product. That speaks for itself, because what we're doing is meaningful. We feed in human elements, right? We make people feel like it's a privilege to have them on the team, and it's not a privilege for them to work for us, right? You feed it the other way around.
Yeah.
You highlight the processes that you have that do work. No company is perfect, right? So that's obvious. So you highlight what does work, right? So you create cross-functional teams, and you emphasize the point with people coming in, with your customers, whoever it is. Hey, our North Star is daily deployments. This is how we're doing it. We have built cross-functional teams. We're focusing on automation. We're doing X, Y, and Z. And that's going to get us to a point where we will be able to, if we need to, release on a daily basis. So you should have no concerns about where we're heading as a business. And if I was to take all of that and sit in front of that group, you would then be able to sit down and say, it's right, because we're respecting the individuals that work for us. We're respecting the fact that, our company mottos specify that we don't want heroes. It specifies that we want collaboration, that we want trust. It's kind because it's respecting the lives and the balance that we want to give to not just our employees, but also our leadership team, right? Because at that point, if you've got those kind of factions existing within a leadership team, they're not even working as a group, and so they're not cohesive in decisions they make. And You take all of that together, you look at the goal they have. If we go back to the beginning of the conversation, their ultimate goal was to get to a point in the future where they can deploy daily if they so need to.
Yeah.
It works, right? Because you get there eventually. It's not a tomorrow thing, but you get to your end goal in a way that is, as you always say, right, kind, and it worked.
Yeah. Yeah, so you've got the model down. There's one area though that's important here, which is this model, while it has right, kind, and works in it, which is events, is value laden language. I believe it works even if you're Scrooge. Like even if all you care about is money, I actually think this model it allows you to reason very clearly about it. Let's just say I'll play an absolute ruthless Scrooge-like character in this whole thing. And when I ask myself, hey, is this right? My only question is, does it save me money? Now, I could be a dumb Scrooge and it'd be like, it costs $50 more, so I'm not spending it. Well, that's not very wise. That's just a miser. What you really want to say is, so I hear you talking about this thing called people and treating them in some certain way. And so how would I know if I don't know, did an experiment like you said with mobbing? How would I know if I was going to get more money from that? And then you just say, great, if you would like to do an experiment, do a 3-month experiment and just look at feature flow from the team that you did the experiment with versus other teams who have a good track record, right? We think that we can show that if you treat people humanely and sustainably, you'll get a better feature flow. That is, features that are potentially deliverable into production. So that's, from a money point of view, if I don't care and I don't like people, but you tell me that, I'm like, okay, show me. And we show you, and you're like, okay, I see what you're talking about. And then we talk about kind, look, long-term value is driven by long-term commitment. And so on the whole, do you want people who have a flexible attitude? There's problems when people become too complacent in a job, but I also believe it's kind and right and works to as a company, have a continual learning program so that you can directly address the concerns of complacency. And I think having a learning program is great. I think that's right in all dimensions too. Again, if I'm only interested in money and I can be convinced that on a 5-year basis, I get a much better payoff by having people with average tenure in the product of 5 to 7 years, well, there you go. I can test that. And maybe that's too long a horizon for a Scrooge.
But I get your point. It really comes down to asking those key questions at every point in the decision or the problem making process, right?
Yeah, like you've probably heard me say it. You do not have to be a West Coast hippie to use this. It's not meant to be squishy. It's meant to be super clarifying to a leadership team.
Right.
And
so, to summarize this, and if you had to give someone 3 questions to ask themselves or to ask the person sitting across the table from them when they're making decisions, what are those 3 questions that you would put to them at any point in time?
Do you have any agendas that are not on the table?
No.
Well, so that's the first question. And so if we're serious here, I'm like, okay, so you're telling me now that you don't have an agenda on the table. Because in 3 months, when you say, hey, we need to do this because blah, I'd be like, that was an agenda you needed to put on the table 3 months ago. And so if we're being honest players, you got to put everything in. Hey, I'm currently the VP of development and I'm looking for the CIO role. I want the CIO role. And so if you don't put that on the table, you'll be making moves that pad your path to CIO role and maybe ignoring everything else. And so number one question is, what agendas are not on the table and what are we going to do when they come up? I would say the second agenda is given that everyone has personal agendas, can you make a fundamental commitment to be committed to the overall work performance of the whole company? So instead of being parochial about your own team, and see, this is another problem, is even the language structure here starts to break down, because you can't say, hey, don't prefer your team to other teams, because that sets up a dichotomy. What you want to say is, are you willing to work with your team and all adjacent teams to maximize their throughput?
Yes.
That's another major place to stand. Keep your agendas on the table. Make sure you're willing to work with all adjacency to optimize flow through a system. I don't know what third question I would come up with. Maybe something like, hey, are you willing to commit to being a servant leader? Where you're significantly putting the organization's needs ahead of your own. So that's the conversation that you can't have any other conversation with the executive team until you have those three questions. And people don't even have to be honest with you. You could just say, look, you're playing a game with 5 other professionals. And if you are cheating at this game, they'll know.
And you just, if I'm the executive sitting on the other side of the table from the company that the scenario was just brought from, you just made me answer 3 questions that directly relate to the tablets of stone that I outlined at the beginning, which we were essentially breaking. And your 3 questions have provoked me to think about all of those in that time frame. Because now, if I'm putting my agenda out on the table, I'm being honest, I'm being trustworthy. If I'm willing to look out for the throughput of everyone at the company, I'm collaborating.
Yep.
And again, I'm trusting my employees, and that's the key thing, right? That is what you set out as a company to achieve in terms of your goals and what you feel like you represent, and you should represent them throughout every decision-making process you make, if that's truly how you want your company to behave. And if you do that, then you are that servant leader, right? Because you are allowing that to really exist within your business. So, again, Tony, I think it's a fascinating topic, a fascinating model. And this hopefully is one of the first of a few scenarios that we walk through with this. But I think it's just really interesting when you try to put it into a real life scenario, how you would start to tackle those issues, and how you would, again, I don't think it's necessarily that the model is a map that you must follow, but it is a tool that you can leverage in that problem solving, in that resolution process. That really helps you think about things in a different way.
Yeah. So here's what I would say is, you can get that basis for the executives to have that kind of conversation. Then there will be sticky problems. Like, someone is just like, I know it works best when you organize people like this. And someone else will be like, I know it works best when you organize them the opposite way. Well, right there, if you can't use the Right Kind Works framework, then you have to design humane experiments to test who's right. And so maybe the third question I would, are you willing to accept the results of humane experiments, to decide what to do in hard situations?
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah. I think that's what maybe I would change the first one is, can you follow the Kantian imperative? Treat people as ends and not means. That covers so much stuff, but the language is too dense for most people to take like that.
Yeah. No, you'd have, some people would have this thesaurus out for sure.
Yeah. But there you go. If you can't reach executives, you have an extremely hard time. And a small company, if you can't reach the executives, you're absolutely sunk. There's just nowhere to go.
Yeah.
At a medium and large company, you can do some guerrilla tactics to get some really effective stuff in there. CI/CD, platform deploys, that kind of thing. And then you can often find someone who's very ambitious. And they're like, how did you guys do that? And you tell them, and you say, hey, we need help at the executive level to get this out there. Can you help? And so there's some guerrilla ways you can do it at large organizations. Small organizations, you must capture leadership.
Yep. Well, Tony, again, as always, I appreciate it. I hope we're going to pick this up again soon.
Of course.
And for everyone that's, I hope, tuned in, listened, downloaded. Don't be worried. There'll be more iterations on this as we dive a little bit deeper into the model with Tony, who's, I would say, the founder of the Right Kind Works model. But again, Tony, appreciate the time.
That's Rob Me, to be really clear. My CEO at Pivotal, that was all there when I showed up in 2012. So he had been running his company like that for 20 years. So Rob Me is who did all of that. I just picked it up and I'm like, this is awesome.
Well, I'm on board. So glad to hear it. Thanks, Tony.
Perfect, Colin. Talk to you soon.
I hope you enjoyed that. For me, this model brings a level of humanism to the table that is so often ignored in problem solving today. It makes us think in a different way, and it makes us look at how we address situations in a more empathetic manner. Thank you again to Tony for sharing and joining us. We will continue to bring you more on this model and others that can help businesses as they navigate today's issues and begin their journey through transformation.